The neon lights of Nexus Prime Station flickered through the thick haze of smoke and alien breath that filled Murphy's cantina. This wasn't the kind of place decent folks visited after dark. Pirates, smugglers, and broken veterans from a dozen different worlds gathered here to forget their troubles in cheap synthetic alcohol and cheaper company. In the darkest corner booth, far from the main crowd, sat a figure that made even the hardened criminals give him space. Kaldanar was massive by any standard, standing nearly 8 feet tall with powerful arms that could crush steel. His exoskeleton bore the scars of countless battles, and the neural implants grafted along his elongated skull pulsed with an irregular blue light. The Xanthri warrior had once been a proud soldier of the Coalition, but the war had left him a shadow of his former self. His compound eyes, each the size of a human fist, stared blankly at the glass of blue synthahol in his primary hands. The liquid barely registered on his alien biology, but he drank it anyway, chasing memories he couldn't quite escape. The tremor in his secondary arms had gotten worse lately. Combat fatigue. The medics called it post-traumatic stress, the humans said. Whatever the name, it meant sleepless nights filled with screaming and the smell of burning flesh. The cantina's usual sounds washed over him like white noise. Alien languages mixed together in a babble of commerce and desperation. Somewhere in the back, a Throgian was arm-wrestling a mechanical enforcer droid for credits. Near the bar, Tavelkari smugglers argued over shipping routes through contested space. None of it mattered to Kaldanar anymore. That's when she walked in. She moved differently than the usual cantina crowd, where others slouched or swaggered. She walked with purpose. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her clothes were clean but unremarkable. What caught Kaldanar's attention wasn't her appearance, but the way she scanned the room. Her eyes held the same alertness he'd seen in soldiers on patrol. The young human woman approached his table slowly, her hands visible and empty. Smart girl. She'd done her homework. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady despite the nervousness he could smell on her. "Are you Kaldanar?" "The one who served with the 3rd Human Infantry during the Kepler campaign." Kaldanar's mandibles clicked shut with a sound like breaking bones. His compound eyes focused on her with difficulty, the alcohol making the world swim slightly. Press credentials hung from a lanyard round her neck, cutting the dim light from his neural implants. "Go away, human," he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. Each word was carefully pronounced through his alien vocal cords. "You don't want to hear what I have to say. Trust me on this." But the journalist didn't leave. Instead, she slid into the booth across from him, her movements careful and deliberate, up close. He could see she was younger than he'd first thought. Maybe 25. Earth years, barely old enough to remember the war, let alone understand what it had cost. "Please," she said, leaning forward slightly. "My name is reporter Kim Minar from Galactic Truth Network. The galaxy needs to know what really happened out there, what humans did during the war. The Coalition's official reports don't tell the whole story." Kaldanar's secondary arms twitched involuntarily. The mention of the war sent familiar spikes of adrenaline through his system. His neural implants pulsed faster, casting dancing shadows on the table between them. What humans did. His mandibles spread in what might have been bitter laughter, but the sound was more like metal scraping against rock. "Little reporter, you have no idea what your species is capable of. The things I witnessed out there in the dark between stars, they haunt my dreams still." He lifted his glass with one massive hand and drained it in a single gulp. The synthahol burnt down his throat, but it was nothing compared to the fire in his memories. When he set the glass down, it cracked under the pressure of his grip. The Coalition likes to paint humans as noble explorers. He continued, his compound eyes now fixed on her with uncomfortable intensity. Peaceful scientists and diplomats who only fought when they had no choice. That's what they tell the galaxy. In their pretty speeches and memorial services, Mina pulled out a small recording device and placed it on the table between them. What's the truth, then? Calvin stared at the device for a long moment, then back at the young human sitting across from him. She reminded him of someone, though he couldn't quite place who. Maybe it was the determination in her eyes, or the way she held herself ready for anything. It was a very human trait, that readiness. The truth. He signaled the bartender for another drink with a gesture of his lower left arm. The truth is that the humans I fought beside weren't the peaceful explorers your propaganda portrays. They were something far more terrifying than any hive warrior or coalition battle drone. The bartender, a nervous Quellan with too many eyes, hurried over with a fresh glass. He set it down without looking directly at Kalthana and scurried away quickly. They were what happens when you corner something that refuses to die. Kalthana continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Very well. Little reporter, I'll tell you what I saw. But don't say I didn't warn you. Some truths are too heavy for young shoulders to carry. Kalthana's eyes grew distant as he stared into his drink, seeing something far beyond the cantina walls. His neural implants flickered faster now, casting erratic blue shadows across his scarred face. Kepler offered to be, he said slowly, as if the name itself carried weight. Most folks know it as New Sol Colony. Pretty little mining world on the outer rim. About 40,000 human settlers working the lithium deposits. Should have been an easy target for the hive. He took a long drink before continuing. I was leading Alpha Squad, 12 of the finest Zenthri shock troops the Coalition had ever produced. We'd been bred for war, literally. Enhanced reflexes, reinforced bones, combat drugs flowing through our veins. Each of us could take down 10 regular soldiers without breaking a sweat. Myrna leaned forward, her recorder catching every word. What made Kepler to be different? The hive came in force. Kalthana's mandibles clicked nervously. 53,000 warriors. According to our final count, Scythe-class fighters, brood mothers, even a few of those nightmare devourer units. They surrounded the entire colony in a perfect ring of death. His secondary arms began to shake again. We had maybe 5,000 defenders total. Half were civilians who'd never held a weapon before the sirens started screaming. The other half were a mix of coalition forces and local security, against 50,000 hive warriors. We should have lasted maybe 6 hours, but you held for 3 months. Minar prompted. Because of the humans, Kalthana said simply, I thought I understood warfare. I'd studied every major battle in galactic history, trained with the best tactical minds in the Coalition. But watching humans fight when they're truly desperate, it's like watching physics break down. The cantina around them seemed to fade as Kalthana's voice took on a haunted quality. The first week, we lost the outer defensive ring. Standard military doctrine said we should have surrendered right there. Instead, Corporal Deho, this skinny human kid who looked like he'd blow away in a strong wind, started doing things with mining explosives that shouldn't have been possible. The mining complex had charges for blasting through rock, standard stuff. But Deho started combining them in ways that made no sense on paper. He'd take a simple demolition charge and jury-rig it with metal fragments, timing devices made from old communicators, even kitchen timers from the cafeteria. Kalthana's compound, I seemed to see through time itself. I watched him crawl through ventilation shafts for hours, setting up traps that would make veteran engineers cry. When the hive sent a wave of Scythe-class warriors through the main tunnel, Deho triggered a chain reaction that brought down to city blocks worth of tunnel system. buried 300 hive warriors under 1 million tons of rock. The kid was covered in burns and bleeding from a dozen cuts, but he just looked at the rubble and said, "Think we can do better next time." Then he started sketching out plans for bigger explosions. Minna's eyes widened. How did he know how to do that? That's what I asked him. Kalthana replied. Turns out he'd studied mining engineering for 2 years before dropping out to join the Colonial Guard. Said he was bored with rocks. But when his home was threatened, that boring knowledge became the difference between life and death for thousands of people. The alien warrior's voice dropped lower as the siege went on. Things got worse. Supply drops couldn't get through the eye blockade. Ammunition ran low, then ran out completely. Food became scarce. Medical supplies were gone by week 4. That's when I met Private Hygiene. Tiny woman, maybe 5 feet tall. Worked maintenance before the war. When our last ammunition fabricator got destroyed by hive acid spitters, she started making bullets by hand. Kalthana held up one of his massive hands. My claws can tear through steel plating. But watching her work was something else. She'd take scrap metal from destroyed vehicles, heat it over cooking fires, and shape it into ammunition using nothing but basic tools and pure determination. Each bullet took her almost an hour to make. She worked 18-hour shifts, her hands bleeding from the metal shards, fingers burned from the heat. But she never stopped, never complained, just kept making ammunition one piece at a time. His voice cracked slightly. I asked her why she didn't just rest. Let someone else take over. She looked at me with these tired eyes and said, "Because every bullet I make might save someone's life tomorrow." Then she went back to work. The cantina's noise seemed muted now, as if the very air was holding its breath. Kalthana's neural implants pulsed in a pattern that looked almost like a heartbeat. The final day came on a Tuesday. The hive had been probing our defenses for weeks, testing for weak points. They found one in the eastern sector where a plasma bombardment had cracked the main support structure. Captain Wujin was holding that section with maybe 30 soldiers against 1,000 hive warrior. I was leading a counterattack when the ceiling started coming down. Wujin got caught under a falling beam, crushed both his legs completely. Kalthana's mandibles clicked rapidly. Any rational being would have called for evacuation, but Wujin started dragging himself across the floor, trailing blood, heading for the manual detonator that would collapse the entire eastern tunnel system. I tried to stop him. Told him we could find another way, but he just looked at me and smiled. Actually smiled. Like he was going to his daughter's birthday party instead of certain death. The alien's voice became barely a whisper. He said, "Tell my family I kept my promise." Then he triggered the charges. Half the mining complex came down, taking out over 1,000 hive warriors and sealing the breach. But the worst part, the part that haunts me still, was what happened as the humans died. They started singing old songs from Earth, melodies I'd never heard before. Amazing Grace, Danny Boy, something called wrong that made the Korean settlers cry. Kalthana's entire frame shuddered as the walls collapsed and the hive closed in. Those humans sang like they were in some kind of church service. Beautiful, haunting melodies that carried over the sound of battle, even when they were dying, bleeding out in the rubble. They kept singing. That's when I understood what humans really are. He continued, his voice thick with emotion. Not just warriors or survivors, but something else entirely. Their hope made flesh, refusing to give up even when the universe itself tells them they should. The cantina had grown quiet round them. Other patrons unconsciously drawn to the power of Kalthana's words. Minna sat transfixed. a recorder forgotten as she listened to a story that would change how she saw her own species. Forever those songs, Kalthana whispered. I still hear them in my dreams, beautiful and terrible. Like listening to angels sing while the world burns. Minnow watched as Kalthana's massive frame trembled. All four of his hands now shaking uncontrollably. The blue glow from his neural implants had turned almost white, pulsing rapidly like a frantic heartbeat. She'd seen veterans before, but nothing like this. The Ghost Fleet. He whispered, and the words seemed to hang in the air like a curse, 6 months after Kepler 440 fell. The Hive was pushing deep into coalition space. They'd taken 17 systems in 3 weeks. Their motherships were like floating cities of death, each one carrying 1,000,000 warriors. He signaled for another drink, but his hands shook so badly that the bartender had to pour it for him. The Coalition High Command was in full retreat. Every tactical computer, every military genius, every AI strategist came to the same conclusion. We were finished. That's when Admiral Yunseo walked into the command center on Titan Station. Kalthana continued, his voice growing stronger as he remembered. She was only 35 years old, youngest flag officer in human history. Half the coalition brass thought she was too young, too inexperienced for such a critical position. Minna leaned closer. What made her different? She looked at our damaged fleet inventory and saw something nobody else did. Kalthana's compound, eyes focused on a point somewhere beyond the cantina walls. 73 ships too damaged to fight effectively, but still spaceworthy. Most commanders would have written them off as scrap metal. Admiral Yunseo called them a ghost fleet. The alien warrior's voice took on an almost reverent tone. The plan was insane by any military standard. Strip out everything non-essential from the damaged ships. Remove life support beyond basic emergency systems. Load them with every explosive we could find. Then fly them straight into the heart of the Hive Armada. Kamikaze attacks. Minnow breathed. Your people have a word for it. Kalthana nodded. But this was bigger than anything in your history books. We're talking about starships, each one the size of a small city, loaded with enough explosives to crack a moon. His secondary arms gestured weakly. I commanded a squadron of Zen-3. Interceptors assigned to escort duty. Our job was to protect the Ghost Fleet ships during their final approach. Make sure they reached their targets, the day of the operation. I watched 73 human crews board ships they knew would become their coffins. No fanfare. No speeches. They just walked up the boarding ramps like they were going to work. Kalthana's voice cracked. I flew wing position with Captain Taihyun's destroyer. The Soul's Vengeance. The ship was a wreck, held together with emergency patches and prayer. Reactor running at maybe 60% efficiency. Hull breaches. Sealed with spare metal plating. Weapon systems completely offline. But Taihyun maintained perfect formation throughout the entire approach. 8 hours of flying through high fighter screens. Dodging plasma, fire and acid projectiles. His ship was falling apart around him, but he never wavered from his flight path. The alien's neural implants pulsed erratically as the memories flooded back, about halfway to the target zone. I heard him on the open comm channel. He was recalling a message for his daughter back on Earth. Minnow felt her throat tighten. What did he say? My little star. Kalthana quoted, his voice barely audible. Daddy has to go away for a while. But I want you to remember something. Every time you look up at the night sky and see the stars twinkling, that's me winking at you. I love you more than all the stars in the galaxy. The cantina had grown completely silent now. Even the roughest pirates and smugglers had stopped their conversations to listen. The Soul's Vengeance was leaking atmosphere by then. Kalthana continued. I could see the vapor trail streaming behind it like tears. Taehyun's life support had failed completely. But he kept flying. When I tried to contact him, he just gave me a thumbs up through the bridge viewport. The first impacts began at 14:27 Galactic Standard Time, the alien warrior said, his voice taking on the precise tone of someone reciting coordinates. The lead ships hit the hive mothership devours more dead center. The explosion was visible from 3-star systems. Away, space lit up like someone had ignited a new sun. 47 human ships, each one carrying enough firepower to level a continent, all detonating within the span of 10 minutes. Kalthana's entire body shuddered. I've seen stellar explosions, watched planets die, witnessed the birth of black holes, but nothing compared to watching those ships become dying stars. Each explosion was beautiful and terrible, like watching creation and destruction happen at the same moment. The Hive lost 6 motherships that day. 6 million warriors turned to cosmic dust in an instant. It was the turning point of the entire war. His compound eyes seemed to dim. But I lost something too. My understanding of what it means to be mortal. What it means to choose your own death. Minna's voice was barely a whisper. The escape pods. That's the part that still wakes me up screaming. Kalthana admitted. Every single one of those ships had functional escape pods. The crews could have ejected at the last second. Let the ships complete their runs on autopilot. I know because I checked the technical reports afterward. Couldn't sleep until I knew for sure. He looked directly at Minna, his alien features conveying an emotion she recognized as profound sorrow. 73 ships, 1,500 crew members. Every single escape pod remained in its launch bay. They chose to stay aboard to ensure maximum damage. Manual course corrections in the final seconds, overriding safety protocols, making sure their ships hit exactly where they needed to hit. Captain Taehyun's final transmission came 30 seconds before impact. Kalthana's voice broke completely. Tell my daughter I kept my promise. Tell her daddy became a star. The alien warrior sat in silence for long moments, his neural implants now pulsing in slow, steady rhythms like a funeral march. After that day, I understood something about humans that terrifies me still. He finally continued, you don't just fight to win. You don't just fight to survive. You fight to become something greater than yourselves, even if it costs you everything. The Ghost Fleet didn't just destroy Hive motherships. It sent a message across the galaxy that humans would rather die as heroes than live as slaves. Minna sat back, overwhelmed by the weight of the story round them. The cantina remained eerily quiet, as if even the hardened criminals and smugglers understood they had witnessed something sacred. 1,500 people. She whispered, 1,500 stars. Kalthana corrected. That's how I think of them now. Every time I look up at the night sky, I see them all still flying in perfect formation, keeping their promises to the ones they left behind. The silence in the cantina stretched on as Kalthana stared into his drink, his massive frame seeming to shrink under the weight of memory. When he spoke again, his voice was so quiet that Minna had to lean across the table to hear him. Titans. Edge was supposed to be a temporary forward operating base. He began, his neural implants dimming to a soft blue glow, just a collection of prefab bunkers and landing pads carved into an asteroid. Nothing fancy, nothing permanent. We were there to monitor Hive movements in the outer system. He paused, his mandibles clicking softly. That's where I met Dr. So-young. She was maybe 30 years old, small even by human standards, couldn't have weighed more than 50 kilograms soaking wet, had these gentle hands that looked like they'd never held anything harder than a medical scanner. The Coalition Medical Corps followed standard protocol. Kalthana continued his compound. Eyes distant. Zen-3 medics treated Zen-3 wounded. Velkari doctors worked on their own people. Humans took care of humans. It made sense from a biological standpoint. Different species, different medical needs. Men are shifted in her seat. But Dr. So Young was different. She treated everyone. The alien warrior said simply, didn't matter what species, what faction, what side of the war they were on. If something was bleeding and breathing, she'd work on it. Kalthana's secondary arms began to tremble again. The first time I saw her treat a hive prisoner, I thought she'd lost her mind. We'd captured a Scythe-class warrior during a reconnaissance mission. Nasty piece of work, all claws and acidic blood. Bred in the hive biofactories for one purpose only, killing humans. Minar whispered, exactly. This thing had personally slaughtered maybe 24 human soldiers before we brought it down. Its claws were still stained with human blood when we dragged it into the medical bay, the aliens. Voice took on an edge of disbelief. Most of us wanted to space it immediately. Standard procedure for hive prisoners was interrogation, then disposal. They couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be converted, couldn't even communicate beyond basic pheromone signals. But Dr. So Young saw it writhing on the medical table. Acid burns covering half its karapochi from our plasma weapons, and her first instinct was to help it. Kalthana shook his head slowly. I watched her spend 6 hours performing surgery on that thing. 6 hours of delicate work while hive artillery shells pounded our position every few minutes. The whole base was shaking, emergency lights flashing, and she's there with her surgical tools working on a creature that would happily eat her alive. The Scythe-class warrior kept trying to slash at her with its remaining functional claw. Had to be restrained with titanium cables. But every time it lashed out, Dr. So Young would just pause, wait for it to calm down, then keep working. Mina felt a chill run down her spine. Wasn't she afraid, terrified? Kalthana admitted, I could smell the fear on her, see her hands, shaking when she thought nobody was looking. But she never stopped working. Never gave up on that alien-killing machine. I finally asked her why she was wasting medical supplies on something that would murder her the first chance it got. You know what she said? The cantina seemed to hold its breath. Because it's wounded, and I'm a doctor, Kalthana quoted. Like it was the most obvious thing in the galaxy. Like the fact that this creature was designed to kill her people was completely irrelevant. His neural implants pulsed faster. She spent another 4 hours after the surgery monitoring its recovery, made sure it was hydrated, that its wounds were healing properly, that it wasn't developing infections, treated it better than most medics treat their own species. The Scythe-class warrior survived because of her care. When it was healthy enough to transfer to the prison facility, it actually seemed confused, like it couldn't understand why a human had helped it. Kalthana's voice grew heavier. That became Dr. So Young's pattern. Every wounded prisoner that came through our base got the same treatment. Hive drones, Scythe-class warriors. Even a brood mother that we captured during a raid. She saved. Them all. The other human soldiers started calling her the Angel of Titan's Edge. Said she had some kind of magic touch that could heal anything that breathed. The alien warrior's mandibles clicked rapidly. But I knew the truth. It wasn't magic. It was something far more powerful and far more dangerous. It was compassion without limits. Mercy without conditions. The end came during the Battle of the Outer Rings. Kalthana continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The Hive launched a massive assault on our position, 3,000 warriors. Supported by plasma artillery and acid bomber drones, our perimeter collapsed within the first hour. The main bunker took a direct hit that killed half our command staff. But the medical bay was in the deepest part of the base, carved into solid rock. Dr. So Young was down there with 12 wounded prisoners and maybe 6 human casualties. His entire frame shuddered. I was leading a counterattack on the surface when the plasma bomb hit. High weapon, designed to melt through reinforced armor. It punched straight through 30 meters of rock and detonated inside the medical bay. By the time we fought our way down there, the ceiling was coming apart. Massive chunks of stone falling like rain. The air was full of dust and smoke and the screams of the wounded. Caldener's voice broke completely. I found Dr. So Young at the center of the bay, thrown across a group of wounded prisoners, humans and hive warriors alike, all huddled together under her body. She'd used herself as a shield. Minor breathed. A 2-ton piece of ceiling had crushed her spine. The alien continued, tears now flowing from his compound eyes. She was dying, bleeding internally. But she kept trying to check on the wounded round her, kept asking if everyone was okay. The hive prisoners she'd protected were looking at her with something I'd never seen before. Recognition, understanding, maybe even gratitude. Her last words were to me. Caldener whispered, "Take care of them, all of them. They're patients now, not enemies." The cantina was completely silent now. The only sound the soft hum of the air recyclers and the distant noise of the station's machinery. She died protecting creatures that had been engineered to hate her, Caldener said finally. Gave her life for beings that most of the galaxy considered irredeemable monsters. I've been trying to understand it for 5 years now. How someone could show such mercy to their enemies. How someone could choose compassion over survival. He looked directly at Minar, his alien features conveying a depth of sorrow that transcended species. Dr. So Young didn't just save lives. That day, she proved that humanity's greatest weapon isn't your technology or your tactics. It's your ability to see worth in everything that lives, even when that thing was created to destroy you. The prisoners she saved, 3 of them survived. The collapse, they were eventually transferred to rehabilitation facilities where human doctors continue to work. I heard that 2 of them actually integrated successfully into coalition society. That's her real legacy. Caldener concluded. Not just the lives she saved, but the proof that even in the darkest moments of war, humans can choose to be healers instead of killers. Minor sat in stunned silence, understanding that she had just heard about someone who embodied the very best of what humanity could be. The cantina's atmosphere seemed to grow heavier as Caldener's neural implants began pulsing in. Chaotic patterns, casting wild shadows across the scarred table between them. His forehands trembled as he reached for his drink, then stopped, staring at his reflection in the blue liquid. Victory. He said the word like it tasted bitter. The coalition declared victory on a Tuesday. I remember because the news feeds kept repeating the same timestamp over and over. War officially ends at 1547 Galactic Standard Time. Like you, could just turn off 5 years of hell with the flip of a switch. Minar watched as the massive alien's entire frame seemed to deflate. You expected something different when the hives rendered. I expected humans to act like every other species in galactic history. Caldener replied, his compound eyes focusing on something far beyond the cantina walls. When the Velkari Empire conquered the Throgian republics 2 centuries ago, they enslaved the entire population. When my own people defeated the Silicon Collective, we stripped their worlds bare and left them to die in the void. His mandibles click slowly. That's how war ends in the galaxy. The strong take everything from the weak. The victors write history while the defeated become footnotes. But humans. He shook his head. Humans broke every rule of conquest that had existed since the first civilization reached for the stars. Caldener's voice grew distant as he remembered. The surrender ceremony was held in Geneva, on Earth. I was there as part of the coalition honor guard, representing the Zenthri. Military, expected to see Hive leadership dragged in chains, forced to kneel before human commanders. Instead, General Hyan walked into that assembly hall like he was greeting old friends. The man who had orchestrated humanity's greatest military victories, who had outmaneuvered Hive strategists for 5 years, treating the enemy with more respect than they'd ever shown anyone. Minor leaned forward. What did the Hive delegation look like? Broken, Kalthana admitted. 3 brood mothers and a handful of scythe-class warriors. All that remained of their leadership caste. They'd expected to be executed immediately. In Hive culture, defeated enemies are consumed by the victors. They were prepared to die. General Hyanwu's opening statement lasted 47 minutes. The alien continued, his neural implants now pulsing in steady, slow rhythms. I timed it because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He started by acknowledging the casualties on both sides, listed the names of human colonies that had been destroyed, but also spoke about Hive nursery worlds that coalition forces had been forced to sterilize. He called it a tragedy that no species should have to endure. Kalthana's voice cracked slightly. Then he did something that made every non-human delegate in that room question their understanding of warfare. He offered the Hive survivors reconstruction aid, not just food and medical supplies, the alien warrior clarified. Complete terraforming assistance to establish new colonies. Technology transfers to help them rebuild their civilization. Educational programs to integrate Hive younglings into coalition society. Minna's eyes widened. They were offering to help rebuild the enemy that had tried to exterminate them. More than that. Kalthana said, General Hyanwu proposed a pathway to full coalition citizenship for any Hive individual who wanted it. Integration programs, job training, even representation in the Galactic Senate. The Hive delegation couldn't understand it either. I watched. The lead brood mother's biochemical indicators spiked to dangerous levels. She was experiencing something her species had no word for. What was it? Mina asked. Hope, Kalthana whispered. For the first time in their evolutionary history, defeated Hive warriors were being offered life instead of death. The alien secondary arms gestured weakly. I expected the other coalition species to object. Surely the Velkari would demand tribute, or the Throgians would insist on territorial concessions. But every delegate supported the human proposal, because they'd all seen what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. He continued. Nobody wanted to risk making humanity an enemy again. Kalthana stared at his hands, all 4 of them now shaking uncontrollably. For 5 years since that day, I've been trying to understand the paradox. How can a species show such mercy to defeated enemies while being capable of the most ruthlessly efficient warfare the galaxy has ever seen? The nightmares I have aren't from my own battles. He admitted, his voice barely audible. They're from witnessing what humans become when their survival is threatened, and then watching them choose compassion when vengeance would have been easier. You want to know what really terrifies me about your species? Kalthana asked, his compound eyes fixing on Minar with uncomfortable intensity. It's not your weapons, though they're the most advanced in the galaxy. It's not your tactics, though you've revolutionized military strategy. It's your ability to remain human even when circumstances demand you become monsters. The cantina round them had grown completely silent. Even the roughest smugglers and pirates seemed to understand they were witnessing something profound. During the war, I watched humans do impossible things, Kalthana continued. Corporal Deho turning mining equipment into weapons of mass destruction, Private Hygiene manufacturing ammunition with her bare hands, Captain Taihan flying into certain death while recording bedtime stories for his daughter. Dr. Soyeon treating enemy prisoners with the same care she'd show her own family. Admiral Yunseo sacrificing 1,500 volunteers to save millions. General Hyanwu offering friendship to creatures that had tried to genocide his species. Your people didn't win through superior technology or numbers, the alien warrior said, his voice growing stronger. You won because you never stopped being human, even when facing extinction. That's what keeps me awake at night. The knowledge that humanity can be both angel and demon, healer and destroyer. All at the same moment, you can show mercy to your enemies while raining death on their armies. You can offer hope to the hopeless while being absolutely ruthless in pursuit of victory. Minar sat in stunned silence as Kalthana slowly rose from the booth, his massive frame casting long shadows in the dim cantina light. "Tell your story," he said, his voice hollow but determined. "Let the galaxy know what humans are truly capable of. But remember, what I've shared should serve as both inspiration and warning. Humanity is capable of incredible things when threatened." The alien warrior continued, his neural implants now pulsing in patterns that looked almost like a salute. The galaxy would do well to remember that, not as a threat, but as a promise that if you ever face extinction, if you ever need someone to stand between you and the darkness, humans will be there. They'll fight for you with the same terrifying intensity they showed during the war, and when the fighting is over, they'll help you rebuild. Kalthana turned and walked toward the cantina's exit, his heavy footsteps echoing in the silence. At the doorway, he paused and looked back at Minar one last time. The Hive integration program has been completely successful, he said quietly. 3,000 former Hive warriors now serve in the Coalition Defense Force, protecting the same species they once tried to destroy. They wear human-designed uniforms and carry human-manufactured weapons, and every one of them volunteers for the most dangerous assignments. Trying to repay a debt, they say, can never be fully settled. With that, the alien warrior disappeared into the station's corridors, leaving Minar alone with her thoughts and a story that would change how the galaxy saw humanity forever. She sat in the empty cantina for a long time, understanding that she had just witnessed the testimony of someone forever changed by the terrifying nobility of the human spirit. The recording device on the table had captured every word, but she knew that no technology could fully convey the weight of what she'd heard. Outside the cantina's windows, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, and somewhere among them, humans continued to explore, to build, to hope, ready to become heroes or demons as circumstances required, but always remaining human. Asterisk, asterisk, the end asterisk, asterisk.